Thank you for tuning in to the Art of Grace podcast, where God is creating a better you. I am your host, Farah. Listen in to part 2 of Moving from Fear to Fearlessness. Ladies, do you want to know how to move from fear to favor? Listen in and see how Jesus did it for us. Welcome to another episode of the Art of Grace podcast, where God is creating a better you. I'm your host, Farah, and number one Grace Girl. Listen, thank you for tuning in today. I am so happy that you have joined me. The first thing that I want to say before I even start on this topic is don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment to this page. Thank you so much for you all who have been following me for as long as you've been following me, and for sharing this podcast with others and for being blessed by it. I want to also thank those who have gotten on here and who have been a guest of mine. It's rare that I, jump on by myself, but, tonight I felt like it was time for me to do that part 2 that you all have been waiting for, of moving from fear into fearlessness. I can tell you that when I rolled out that episode in early December, I didn't expect to take this long to get back and to bring this part 2 to you all. But I tell you, it was a rocky season because, a lot of us had gotten sick, and I was one of those. I very rarely, have to shut down and just take it easy. But, at this point, I had to, in order to get some rest and relaxation and to get my body to heal and, to start feeling better. So I am back. We are back with part 2. And ladies, thank you so much for reaching out to me and letting me know how much that part 1 has blessed you. Thank you for allowing me to share that topic with you on moving from fear to fearlessness part 1. And so now we are on part 2, and God has given me something so different from part 1. I want to say to you that in this season, so many of you all know that grace is my foundation, but I'm getting more and more in new revelations of grace. And so I felt like it might have been time for me to slow down to hear from God on this part 2, because I know there's going to be a blessing for you all. And I had an opportunity to go back to the Word to look up a woman who really had to move from fear to fearlessness, and how Jesus came to her rescue. And, so it's in John chapter 8, verse 1 through 11, the woman who was about to be stoned. She was about to be stoned, and so many of us know this story because she was judged because of her past. How many of us stay in fear because of our past? I think that that's how the enemy tries to trap us into thinking that God doesn't love us, God has not forgiven us. And you know what? He actually, lots of times, he gets in our head, and sometimes we get in our own head, and so convincing ourselves that God cannot forgive us. And so we stay in fear that we can move forward. And this woman, Jesus showed up at a time where she was about to be stoned. Could you imagine it being the day of your execution, or the day that you're going to leave this earth? And Jesus is like, no, I'm not done with her story. And he wasn't done with her story. What an immense amount of fear she must have felt to be surrounded by men who were ready to stone her. I can't even imagine living in that time. How blessed are we women that I can sit here right now in my office, in my home, and record a podcast episode and not be in fear of losing my life. But I will tell you that there's women around the world who still struggle with this, that there are still cultures that believe that women are, they're lower and less than. And in this case, this was a time when, judgment was so thick. And guess what? It still exists. The Bible says that there's nothing new under the sun. And so for her to be in a place of immense fear, extreme fear and fright, and, about to lose her life, and Jesus is like, no, I'm not done with her. And guess what? Jesus is not done with you. He is not done with your story. Don't be in fear. Let's be in a season of being fearless. You know what he said? We're going to move from fear to favor. She moved from fear to favor. Fear of being rejected and condemned and judged, and then favor showed up. What is favor? Unmerited grace. Grace is unmerited favor. And Jesus himself, favor in the flesh, showed up on her behalf. And so let's talk about a couple of points. I'm not going to be before you all long, but in John chapter 8, 1 through 11, go back and read the whole story about this woman. But I just wanted to, touch on a few key points about her. This woman was caught in the act of adultery. She faced public humiliation and the threat of death. Her fear was justified, but it set the stage for an encounter with Jesus, grace in the flesh, favor in the flesh, who would transform her destiny. How many of us want our destiny transformed? How many of us want to get out of a place of fear of being condemned and of being judged? That's one of the the parts of fear that's birthed, right, is, out of fear comes judgment. Out of fear comes condemnation. Lots of times it does come in the form of other people, but I will tell you, I believe, now this is just my belief, a lot of my fear comes from me, myself, getting in my head. What are people going to think? Do I sound right? Do I look right? Do I fit in? And those are just areas that Jesus said, you know what, you don't have to feel like that. I'm here with you. And so I really want to encourage you women in this season to not allow anyone, don't allow yourself to keep you in a place of fear because you're judging yourself, because you're condemning yourself for your past. You made a past mistake. You made a mistake that maybe no one saw, but yet you're judging yourself for it. Be free of it. Be free and walk in his grace and his favor. Fear often comes when we feel exposed, condemned, or trapped, yet it can be the very thing that leads us to grace. Can you imagine the fear that you're walking in right now leading you to grace? Allow that, that fear to lead you to grace. Don't stay stuck in it, ladies. Don't stay stuck in it, okay? My second point that I wanted to make was that Jesus is a turning point for us, right? Sometimes we feel like we're at the very end of our rope. We can't see the finish line, but because we can't see around that curve. But little do we know that when we get to the very edge of that cliff, the very edge of that road, and we make that quick little turn, that Jesus is our turning point. Allow him to be your turning point. Don't think that, that he can't turn this thing around. Could you imagine being in her shoes, being there on the ground, surrounded by a bunch of men with stones in their hands, and she couldn't see the end, and Jesus showed up, he was her turning point? Allow him to be your turning point. Allow grace to be your turning point. Allow him to show up on the scene. And I think that sometimes we think that, Jesus is going to show up through prayer, right? And, or, we're in church, or, we're in a circle of people that are positive. Sometimes Jesus shows up at the time when we really need him. The Bible says that when we are weak, that he is strong. How many times has he shown up when you were crying? How many times has he shown up when you were depressed? How many times did he show up when you felt like you wanted to commit suicide because fear had tried to overtake you? Let me tell you something. He's going to show up even in those moments. Don't think that he's going to show up only when you're praying, okay? Because I have so many women feel like, their prayers are not heard, or they're not praying strong enough, or they're not strong enough in anything. And yet, I know for myself, speaking from myself, that lots of times when Jesus has shown up for me, it's been in my most crucial, pressure-filled moments. It wasn't when I was praying. Yes, he heard my prayers, right? Remember when Daniel said he prayed and, he asked, the angel, what took him so long? And he said he heard him from 21 days before. Jesus has heard you. I'm not putting a number of days on it, but I'm just showing you that he's heard your prayers and that he's going to show up at the time that you least expect it. So he is your turning point. Instead of condemning her, Jesus challenged her accusers and shifted the atmosphere from fear to redemption. His words, let him who is without sin cast the first stone, removed the power of fear and demonstrated that grace triumphs over judgment. In our own lives, encountering Jesus can turn our fear into faith. Can you imagine that the power of fear that was trying to demonstrate itself in her life, literally it demonstrated the grace of God that triumphed over the judgment. His grace is going to triumph over that fear. What does triumph mean? It means you've already won. It means that grace wins every single time. So when fear shows up at your door and you feel like you're losing, you're not losing, because grace is going to triumph over that, okay? And favor is going to show up. So let's do this. Let's choose faith over fear. How do we do that? Did you hear what I just said? You have to choose. He's given us the ability to choose. Choose life. Okay? I'm not going to choose to stay in fear. I'm not going to do it. Not in this good old age, as me and my friends say. Not in this good old age am I going to sit there and just allow myself to choose fear. I'm not, just, set yourself still and say, I'm not going to choose fear today. I'm going to choose faith. I'm going to choose favor. I'm going to choose God's grace. Once her accusers left, the woman had a choice. Remain in fear or step into the grace Jesus offered. Fear paralyzes, but faith propels. Faith is going to propel you into your season of favor. Allow it to propel you. Don't let fear paralyze you. If you're paralyzed right now, if you hear this message right now, if you all have someone you want to share this message with that's going to inspire, let your friends know, let your sister know, let your daughters know that don't let fear paralyze you. Please don't. Don't allow it. Choose faith over fear. She received a second chance, proving that fear can be the catalyst for transformation when we trust God. So that's what I was saying, that sometimes when we're in a state of fear, remember how when the Israelites was up against the Red Sea and God said, be still. And that being still, it wasn't in a moment that he parted the seas. They had to stay there all night, knowing that their enemy who was coming against them and causing them to have fear was over on the other side, was behind them. And God worked all night to part that sea. Could you imagine that type of fear? Some of us are in that fear right now. We're in our homes right now wondering, how is God going to do it? He says, be still, and you're going to lay there all night, just processing and thinking, how is he going to do it? But just be still right now. Not be still in fear, but be still in faith. Don't allow fear to paralyze you. Please don't allow it to paralyze you. All right, so our fourth point, fearlessness through forgiveness. And this is an area where, a lot of us struggle with forgiveness, right? So forgiveness can also keep us in fear. And forgiveness in a sense where you're forgiving yourself. So let me say that. Lots of times when we're in fear, it's because we haven't forgiven ourselves. Look in the mirror right now for those who want to walk forward in faith and in favor and say, I forgive you. Farah, I forgive you. Whatever your name is right now. Maybe it's a person who you're trying to forgive. Say that out loud. I forgive you. Sometimes we have to forgive ourselves in order to move forward, Jesus not only saved her life, but also freed her from condemnation, telling her to go and sin no more. This act of mercy empowered her to walk in boldness and purpose. Fearlessness is found in knowing that we are forgiven and loved. Jesus has forgiven us. Don't be fooled that he hasn't forgiven us. He came and gave his life for you, his very life. So why wouldn't he forgive you? Why wouldn't he forgive you? He did it on the cross one time. He didn't have to do it again and again and again. He did it one time. His blood is so powerful that he did it one time. Not only did Jesus forgive you, if he forgave you, he wants you to forgive yourself. Forgive yourself. Get out of that state of fear and paralyzation. Don't be paralyzed. Walk in your favor. Walk with your crown straight, ladies. Walk with your crown straight. You are forgiven and loved. And the last point I wanted to make is favor in a new beginning. What was meant to destroy her became a testimony of grace. And this woman's story teaches us that fear can be turned into favor when we surrender to God's plan. What the enemy meant for harm, God can use for good. So you know what? Her story of fear actually turned into favor. It turned into a miraculous story. It turned into her having a new life. I started out by saying that, that was her day of execution. That was her day to die. But yet Jesus said, no, she's going to live. She's living through me. He was her turning point. He was her lily in the valley. He was her everything. He was her favor. Let Jesus, who shows up in the flesh to your life, be your favorite today. Allow him to be that great grace in your life. Allow him to be that. Forgive yourself. Don't feel condemned. Stand up tall, women. Stand up bold. Live out loud. Live your best life and walk in your destiny and your purpose. Okay, so don't let fear paralyze you. You're fearless. You are not fearful. You are fearless. You are a fearless woman. You are a strong woman. You're a great woman. You're a powerful woman. Some years ago, gosh, it might have been probably almost 20 years ago, I remember teaching a lesson called Great Women, Great Power Must Go Through Great Pressure. And I will tell you, I was in a season of just coming out of a great breakthrough, and that great breakthrough was met with fear. Because I'm trying to please people, because I'm trying to make sure that everything is so great. But in that instance, I was actually walking in fear, and it showed up. And God gave me that message. Great women, great power must go through great pressure. So when pressure comes, it comes to try to cause you to have fear. Don't condemn yourself. Don't allow anyone else to cause you any condemnation or judge you. Stand up in the grace and the favor that you have in God. Show up. Show up. Fight up, as my friends say. I love it. Fight up. You're not going to fight down. The enemy has lost. You're going to triumph. You're going to walk in his grace and favor, and you're going to live your best life, and you're going to walk in your destiny and your purpose, and you're going to go from fear to fearlessness and from fear to favor. So until next time, ladies, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this page. Thank you so much for following the Art of Grace podcast. You all have been amazing. For those who want to reach out to me to be on the podcast, listen, hit me up. I would love to get with you. You know that this podcast is for women in ministry in the marketplace. You know, all the ladies who I've been interviewing, you know, in the past and those who are to come, you all have been a blessing to the ladies who have been watching. They love your stories. They love, you know, and I love how you all are so transparent. You are open to share your stories and, you know, who you are. And that brings me so much joy because this podcast is meant for you all. So until next time, thank you for watching another episode of the Art of Grace podcast, where God is creating a better you. And we will see you in the next episode. Take care. Did you enjoy today's episode? Part 2, moving from fear to fearlessness. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment. Until next time.